Better. All right, here we go. Maseches Eruvin, Daf Lamed Hey, Baruch Hashem. We are at the bottom of Lamed Daled, Amud Beis, and we are at a new Mishnah. We're at a new Mishnah. These continuing applications of whether or not an Eruv could be kosher. And here we have the practical issue of I lost my keys. What happens if you have your Eruv in a particular spot? Opens the Mishnah. Nasno v'migdal v'avad hamafteach. So if you lose your keys and your Eruv is locked in a particular place, what should you do? What? So there, that's what, huh? Oh, am I in the wrong place? No, you're good. No, okay, fine. Okay. Hareza Eruv, if in fact you lock your Eruv in a particular place, says the Tanakama that your Eruv still counts. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, im eno yodea shehamafteach b'mekomo, this is machmir on the other angle entirely. It's not just that it's locked or not locked. You need to know exactly where the key is. That's what he says here, that im eno yodea shemaftech b'mekomo eno eruv. If the key is not hanging on its hook, then it is a nothing. Then it is not going to be a kosher eruv. Opens the Gemara quickly. Ve'amai, I don't understand. You don't have to eat your eruv. Why would it be the case that anyone would say that it's a good eruv? You're trapped. You can't even reach it. How could you say that this is going to be a kosher eruv according to the Tanakama? It doesn't make any sense. So here the Gemara is going to present three answers. Answer number one is here. Answer number two is a quarter of the way down on Lamed Hey. And the answer number three is halfway down on Lamed Hey. Let's get started. Rav and Shmuel Damre Tarvaihu. Rav and Shmuel are in agreement here. And here's how they understood our Mishnah. Hacha b'migdal shalavanam askina. We're dealing with a tower that's made out of bricks. V'Rav Meir hi da'amar poches lechatchila v'notel. These bricks can be taken down one at a time. What about Binyan and Soser? Let's dig in a little bit. It's not. Where did Rav Meir get his shita from? From the following Mishnah. Bayis shemil'ehu peros, sasum v'nichas. Let's say that you had a house and it was filled with fruits and it was enclosed, and v'nichas, one of the walls broke a little bit. So now I could reach into the wall. Here we have a machlokes in the Tanaim. The Tanakama holds notel mimakom hapchas. You can reach your hand into the broken brick, no problem. Reach inside. Whatever you can grab is fine. Says Rav Meir. Rav Meir, oches v'notel lechatchila, that one is allowed to take down the bricks by themselves, no problem at all, and that is considered totally mutter. That is considered totally mutter. So says the Gemara, wait a minute. Before we go on, that's the answer to our Mishnah, by the way. That answer number one of Rav and Shmuel is that we're dealing with a tower where the bricks have been built already. It's already there, and the Eruv is inside, and we're applying Rav Meir from the world of fruit that's in a house to our world of Eruv. If there's a pichas and a breakdown in the wall, the Tanakama holds you can stick your arm in and reach it. Says Rav Meir, and this is our Gemara, just take the bricks off. You're fine. No problem at all. We still haven't yet figured out why that's mutter. What if it's cemented in? So that's going to be the question of the Gemara right now. V'ha'amar Rab Nachman bar Ada, where's 5-6 lines from the bottom of Lamed Daled Amud Beis. Wait a minute. You're saying you're saying that you're allowed to take the bricks down, but that case with the Peiros, where we saw the Tanakama and Rav Meir, not our case, but the case of the Peiros, the Amar of Nachman on that case, Amar of Nachman B'Adam or Shmuel, the Avira Delivne. There we were talking about bricks that weren't even attached to each other. They were just laid on top of one another with no mortar between them. That's what Avira Delivne are. So if that case of the Peiros is Avira Delivne, how can we bring Rav Meir to our case of the bricks? Answers the Gemara, what's the big deal? Hachanami, Avira Delivne. Our Mishnah is also talking about a case where the bricks are loose. No problem, everything's fine. It's a great ukimta. So at this point, the ukimta of our Mishnah is that we're dealing with bricks that are just laid one on top of the other. And the Tanakama was of the opinion that you're allowed to remove the bricks on Shabbos. And the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer did not allow for that to take place. So it says the Gemara as follows. 5 lines from the bottom. In the case of the Peiros, where we saw the Machlokes, Tanakam, and Rav Meir, there we said it only applied by Yontif, but not by Shabbos. And by and large, throughout the Masechta, when we're discussing Eruvin, we're discussing Shabbos and not Yontif. Why? Well, first of all, just Metzias we are. Second of all, Eruvin and Yontif. We spoke about this on Shabbos. You really don't need an Eruv on Yontif. Maybe by Tchum Shabbos you do. So let's see what the Gemara says here. The Gemara says, Hachanami b'Yontif. Our Mishnah here is also talking about Yontif. Says the Gemara, really? Our Mishnah is talking about Yontif? Ihachi, if you want to say that the Machlokes in our Mishnah between the Tanakam and Rabbi Eliezer is about Yontif, then I don't understand. Hainu dekatani Allah, there was a brisa that was taught in regards to our discussion here, and here's what it said. Rabbi Eliezer, Omer im be'ir avad eruv o eruv. If you lost your key in the city, then your Eruv counts. V'im b'sadeh avad ein eruvo eruv. End of the, what is this, a brisa? End of the brisa. That's correct. That if you lost your key in the field, then it's a nothing. Ein eruvo eruv. Says the Gemara, v'ibi yom tov. I don't understand. Mali ir mali sadeh. Who cares where you lose your Eruv on Yontif? You're allowed to carry. Who cares where you lose your Eruv? So says the Gemara, great question. And therefore, as we turn to the top of Lamed Hamad Aleph, the Gemara responds, here is really how this new brisa should read. A person puts their Eruv inside a tower of some kind. You lock the door and you lose the key. Hareze Eruv, no problem. Like the way our Gemara wanted to answer up our Mishnah. So now we have a double ukimta on our Mishnah. Our Mishnah number 1 is talking about bricks that are laid on top of one another with no mortar, so you can just literally pick them up and remove them. And number 2 is we're only talking about Yontif. Continues the Brisa line 3. Avot, the Shabbos, if we were talking about Shabbos, ein eruvo eruv, then that would not work. Ein eruvo eruv. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. It's really all part of the same Brisa. Nimsa hamaftech. What if on Shabbos you found the key? So it depends. Bain be'ir, bain b'sadeh, ein eruvo eruv. The Tanna Kama says it doesn't depend, actually. He says it either way. Rabbi Eliezer, Omer, it depends. Be'ir, eruvo eruv. B'sadeh, ein eruvo eruv. And what's the explanation of Rabbi Eliezer? Says the Gemara, be'ir eruvo eruv ki Reb Shimon. What does Reb Shimon say? And why in the city do we say that it's considered on Shabbos if you find your key on Shabbos? Reb Shimon says it's mutter. Why? Because Reb Shimon holds to Amar, he holds echad gagos ve'echad chatzeros ve'echad karfifos rishus achas hein lekelim sheshavsu b'sofan. Anything in that networked area is considered mutter to carry, and therefore Rabbi Eliezer, following in the heels of Reb Shimon, allows for one to use an eruv if a key is found on Shabbos be'ir. However, b'sadeh ein eruvo eruv kirabanan. However, when it comes to a field, then he follows the dissenting opinion that does not agree with Reb Shimon, and he says ein eruvo eruv. So that's all of this is answer number 1. And again, to repeat, answer 1 is in the name of Rav and Shmuel. They said we're talking about a building of bricks. It's on Yontif, and the bricks are not glued to one another. Answer number 1, nice and clean. We're on the top of Lamed Hamad Amud Aleph with the second version of how to understand our Mishnah. What is the ukimta of our Mishnah? Says the Gemara 9-10 lines down. Rabbi v'Rav Yosef Damrei Tarbai, who they gave a different answer. Hacha b'migdal shel eitza skina. No, we're talking about a wood box. No bricks at all. All right, what about our Mishnah? Demar savar klihu. One shita holds that this box is a kli. The ain binyan bekelim, the ain stira bekelim. You can just literally tear open the box because we have no isser of bona and no isser of stira. Stira is our case here of breaking down the box. No problem. Oh, that's going to match up with our Tanna Kama, who says that because there's no stira bekelim and because our Mishnah is dealing with a wood box that's a kli, you're great. Tear open the box and get your eruv. You're not locked away. Okay, you lost your key. Break open the box. It's totally fine. That's the sheet of the Tanna Kama. Umar Savar Ohelhu. Another Shita holds, that's the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer. He is of the opinion that we're dealing with an Ohel. And by an Ohel, which is kind of more like its own room, I guess, a little bit more sophisticated than a Kli, there we do have an Isser of Binyan and Stira. And therefore Rabbi Eliezer was of the opinion that no, come on, you can't break down. So that would be the nafkamina between them as to what we're talking about. It may not even be a machlokes and psak between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Eliezer within our Mishnah, within version 2 here, because they're just saying there's a different mitzias. That according to version number 2 here, the Tanna Kama was of the opinion that we're dealing with a kli, and Rabbi Eliezer said, no, we're dealing with an ohel. So it doesn't seem like there's really a machlokas there. And the Gemara anyways is going to tear this apart. But before we do, says the Gemara as follows. Ubeplugta dahani tanoi. This machlokas in our Tanoim seems to reflect a machlokas of another story in the Tanoim. Ditnan, the Mishnah writes from the world of Zav, Hikish al gabe shida teva umigdal. If you have a Zav who knocks, he pushes with his hand, he knocks on something, tmein. You can make that tameh tumas maga just by pushing something. Reb Nechemia v'Reb Shimon mitaharin. And they said, no, if the Zav were to push something, that would not make it tameh. My la b'hakamiflage. Mar savar klihu, umar savar ohelhu. Maybe we could say that this machlokes about whether or not the zav who shoves something can make it tameh. It depends what you're touching. If what you're touching is a kli, then that would be problematic. And if it's not a kli, then it would not be problematic. Maybe that because you have to be a kli kibul. You have to be a something in order to become tameh. So says the Gemara, maybe that's the case. Amar Rabbi, what are you guys talking about? 1/3 of the way down, but Tizbara. Does that make any sense? We have other Marim Mikomos that do not use the distinction of kli versus ohel as it relates to tuma. Let's see. Says the Brisa, V'hatanya, ohel v'niseit tameh. What do we see over here? An ohel can become tameh. A second ago, you wanted to say that the kli is what becomes tameh and the ohel is not what becomes tameh. Says Abai, what are you talking about? We have a brisa that shows that an ohel can become tameh just by niseit, just by pushing as well. And then that source continues, that brisa continues, kli ve'eno niseit tahor. And we have another case where kli would not become tahor. The katani seifa, ve'im hayu nisotin, had they been pushed, so then tmein. That even had a kli been pushed, it would be tameh. So then here's the real hook to the question. Zehaklal. Here's what we learned. Niseit machmas kocho tameh. That if something is pushed because of the koach of the zav, if a person's a zav and they push something, it becomes tameh. However, machmas re'ada tahor. If you push something and it vibrates, it kind of shakes in its spot, but it doesn't actually move, so then tahor. So, but wait a minute. The first part of that zehaklal is that if you move something, it becomes tameh. So how did you give me this distinction between kli and ohel? We don't care what it is. It doesn't make a difference. If you move it, then it becomes tameh. But what? And then the second part of this was that maybe it's machmas or ada. So Amar Abaye, Ela Amar Abaye. Therefore, Abaye says you're misunderstanding this machlokes in the brisa. Ela Amar Abaye, halfway down, Lamed Hey Amud Aleph. Abaye says the kule alma hesed machmas to machmas kocho tameh. Everyone agrees kli ohel doesn't make a difference. If you push something and you're a zav, it's going to make a tameh. And as well, machmas re'ada tahor. And everyone as well agrees that if you push it and it only shakes, but the footprint doesn't actually move, that's going to be tahor. What we're talking about is this latter case. This machlokes in the brisa, in the Mishnah actually, between Reb Nechemia and the Tanakama that we just learned 5 lines ago, the one that we tried to connect to our sugya, you learned it totally wrong. It's not the distinction of kli versus ohel, which would have worked nicely. It doesn't work that way because the Marim Makomos don't support it. Rather, their machlokes is uvaha kamiflage. The marsavar have heset, umarsavar lo have heset. You imagine if you have a huge barrel of wine and you kick it with your foot. So you kind of see the liquid moving the jar a little bit. It's moving the barrel, but it doesn't actually move in the end. That's the machlokes that's happening here. Not your distinction of kli versus ohel. And what that does is puts a huge damper on their shita. You wanted to say that what they were talking about was whether or not the box is going to be a kli or no. That's not what we're talking about, because box versus ohel is not really a machlokes. That doesn't exist. And therefore the Gemara says, umas nisin b'mai mukminanla. How then, Abaye, if you're going to uproot their shita, how then do you understand our Mishnah? We just rejected version 2, which was Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef. Therefore, says the Gemara, halfway down, Abaye v'Rava, the Amri Tarvaihu, b'mino, your food is locked up, v'katir b'masna askinan, and it's tied in a rope. So you have your food that's all tied up in some kind of sophisticated knot, something along those lines. Says the Gemara, uvay sakina lenifsake, but you need a knife in order to get access to the eruv. It's tied up in a rope. You can't open it. The Amazon package that's so tight, you need a knife to open it. You can't get there without a knife. So if that's the key, you ever see those like really strong plastic things around boxes? You just can't tear them bare. You need something sharp. You have to peel it by the actual, where they overlap, whatever. But you need something unique. You're not just popping it open barehanded. So then we needed a knife here, and this is what the machlokes is. Tanakama savar la Rabbi Yossi. The Tanakama, who in our Mishnah is lenient, he says, just looking back at our Mishnah, that eruv, if it's all locked up, if it's all tied up, would be according to this ukimta. Why does the Tanakama allow it? Because Rabbi Yossi allows it. Kol ha'kelim nitlin b'Shabbos, no problem. Every kli can be used on Shabbos, chutz mimeser hagadol, except for a saw, v'yaseh shel macharesha, the peg that actually goes into the ground. We've seen this line maybe 5 or 6 times throughout Shas so far, that the only limitation that Rabbi Yossi gives for kelim is exactly this, which is the extreme scenarios. By the way, Ladina, we paskin, for example, that a pair of scissors, according to most poskim, that scissors are a klisha malachto le'isser. So if you're using them stam just to play with them, that's not good. But if you need to cut something with them, fine, you're allowed to cut them, no problem at all. So sometimes I like to make use of them when I'm cutting open like a sugar packet, and you have to be very exact. You don't want to tear any letters. So like the top 1 millimeter is empty of all text on both sides. Great, get a knife, cut it, put it back when you're done. That's Kli Shemalachto Isser. That's kind of relying, I don't know if it's exactly Rabbi Yossi, but it's the same idea that if you have a Kli that you can use, you have a purpose for it, great, you can use it. And therefore, our Mishnah, Tanakama, he's like Rabbi Yossi. It's all tied up. Get a knife and go cut it. You're totally fine. Our only limitations is this massive hacksaw and the hook that's used for plowing. What about Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah, who's Machmer, who says, Ein Ruvo Eruv? No ignorance. What? Yes, but the nature, it could be. I'm just saying, we usually refer to like a hammer, for example, as a Kli Shemalachto L'Isser. You're allowed to use that Kli Shemalachto, which is generally L'Isser, for something that is mutter now. That's mutter. A Kli Shemalachto L'Heter would have no limitations at all. It's a fork.
You use the term, you take a knife and just cut it, as opposed to a scissors.
Right. So, right. Sakina here can't be a regular knife. There has to be some type. I didn't even look that up, but I'm sure that.
Like a utility knife.
Yeah. Rashi here highlights, to Gerald's point, take a look at Rashi. Dibra maschil uvay sakina lemifsake. About halfway down, Rashi says, if you were able to tear the rope barehanded, great. The only real cutting midoraisa is only something that's attached to the ground. So he allows it here. What's with my cracking voice here? He's got to stop now. Okay. So that's going to be answer number one. That works according to the Tanakama / Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Eliezer Savar Laki Rabbi Nechemia. We saw Rabbi Nechemia's Shita. Rabbi Nechemia's Shita is of the most strict in the world. I think it's the most strict Tana in the world of Muksa, and that's as follows. De Amar Afilu Talis Afilu Tarvad Ein Nitlan El Tzorch Tashmishan. You can only use a kli for its exact use. You can't use, for example, a fork to open a plastic package. You can't do that because it's not its tashmisha. So that's why Rabbi Eliezer is makbid in our Mishnah. So Kimta number 3 is that we're dealing with a case scenario where our Eruv is tied up. The Tanakama held like Rabbi Yossi that anything can be used for whatever you want in order to open it, except for these rare things, which is like uvdin dechol type of items, the hacksaw. It's not a Shabbos item, it's uvdin dechol. You're not allowed to use that. Rabbi Eliezer was of the opinion that no, you cannot use a knife to cut a rope. That's not what it's for. Knives are for cutting food, or knives are for whatever they're for, but they're not for cutting ropes. So that would be their machlokes. And that brings us to the next Mishnah, 2/3 of the way down, on Lamed Hey, Amud Aleph. Let's say that your Eruv is right at the edge of your tchum, and says the Mishnah, Nisgal Gel Chutz L'Tchum. So that's case number 1, is that your Eruv rolls, the egg just kind of starts rolling out. It's a little bit of a slope downhill from the right at the end of the 2,000 amma mark of your tchum. Nafal alav gal o nisraf, or something falls on top of it, you can't reach it, or it burns up, or truma v'nitzmeis. In all of these cases, here are the 2 halachos we have to know. Number 1, mi be'od yom, if it happens during the day before Shabbos kicks in, eino eruv. You have a 0 when Bein HaShmashos started. That makes perfect sense because what was your eruv? Nothing. It's all burnt up. It's gone. Or it's truma v'nitmeis, or whatever it is. You have nothing viable at Bein HaShmashos. However, mishecha shecha hareze eruv. If it made it through Bein HaShmashos, however long Bein HaShmashos is, big machlokas poskim, how long Bein HaShmashos is. We, for Shabbos purposes, assume 50 minutes. There are some poskim who assume 42 minutes for Shabbos, 72, 60, there's a whole bunch of shitas. And by fasting, some people are more kal, not on Yom Kippur though. But all of that is if we had it through mishecha shecha. What if you're not sure? So here says the Mishnah, im safek. What if we're not sure if it lasted through? We're not sure exactly what time it became tameh. We just know now that it's tameh, or the building fell. We don't know what time the building fell. So we have a safek. We don't know if our eruv is viable. Says the Gemara, Rav Meir v'Rav Yehuda omrim harezeh chamar gamal. Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda says this is like a donkey and a camel. Rashi here explains that these 2 animals are led in different ways, and they'll pull you in opposite directions. In other words, this suffix is a chumrah. We're not allowed to be lenient here. It's a mashal. Rashi at the bottom explains this explicitly. He has a nice language there. Let me just find it for you. It's 4 lines from the bottom, right in the middle of the line. Nimsa zemoshcho kan lelech v'zemoshcho lekan. Ki adam hamanig chamor v'gamal. It's like a man who is trying to lead both a donkey and a camel. Shechamor holech lefanav. The donkey walks in front of you, and then 3 lines from the bottom is zeman higo, and you're trying to walk the animal. Gamal hu moshech. So it doesn't work. You're following one animal, and the other animal you're pulling, and they can go in different directions. And so that's just a mashal. It's used many times in Shas and in Mishnais as well. That's where it is here. Chamar gamal means that Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda were machmer on a suffix. And we're going to ask a big kasha on this a little bit later today. However, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon Omrim Safek Eruv Kasher. They were of the opinion that if you have a Safek Eruv, so then there should be kasher. What principle are we all thinking of right now? Hopefully, Safek Daraisa Lakula, or Safek Daraisa Lachumra, Safek Rabbanan Lakula, right? So we have to see which one of those actually plays out. Amar Rabbi Yossi, last line of the Mishnah, of Tulmus He'id Mishum Chamisha Zakenim. We have witness, we have testimony from 5 elders. Al Safek Eruv Shekasher. Okay, fine. So we have testimony that it's going to be lenient. We'll see what the Gemara says about this. Now let's go back. Nisgalgel Chutz L'Tchum was the first case of the Mishnah, and there Omar Rava Lo Shanu Ela Shenisgalgel Chutz LeArba Amos of the 2000. So with your 2000, when you're Kona Shvisa there, so at the end of your 2000, you have an extra 4 amos. So there we say it has to be that it's niskalgel outside the 4 amos. Amos, no problem. You can always put it there lechatchila. Hanosein eruvo yeshlo dalet amos. You only have 2,000 amos, and then you need to have a new eruv. But your new eruv is at 2,003 amos. Is that allowed? So you have your dalet amos. If you're kona shvis at the end of your 2,000 amos, you're good to go. That's not a problem. So it says the Gemara, that's how Rava learned up this Mishnah, that as long as it's within Dalet Amos, you are fine. You can even put your Eruv there, seemingly lechatchila, with this language of Hanosein Eruvo Yesh Lo Dalet Amos.
Won't you get 2 more thousand amos if you put your Eruv at the border?
Yeah, you'd get 2,000 if you had to be Kona Shvisa at Amma 2,000. Because what? Say that again?
Wouldn't you get 2,000 more amos when you put your Eruv at the border?
Sorry, you were not Kona Shvisa there. You were Kona Shvisa at Amma 0, wherever you were Kona Shvisa. And your Eruv, you're putting an additional Eruv to stretch you another 2,000, right? Mm-hmm. And now it rolled out of the 2,000 mark. So between your 2 Eruvin, you have 2,003 amos. What's the din? Because it rolled out of your 2,000. That's what the Mishnah is discussing here. Well, that's what Rava is explaining, but the Mishnah is discussing. Does that make sense?
I'm getting there.
So like if let's say that there is 4,000 amos between me and you.
Right.
So I'm here, Kona Shvisa. At the 2,000 amma mark, right here, I put my Eruv, but it rolled outside of the 2,000 line. So now what? Does my Eruv still work?
Depends on what time you did it?
Well, that already we discussed in the Mishnah. If it's before Shabbos, then for sure it's not good. Maybe not actually, because according to Rava seems to say it's even okay. But the point is that we have 2,003 amos between our 2 Eruvin. That's really what we're talking about, and you're only allowed 2,000. Says the Gemara, you should be able to get the Dalet Amos. That's what Rava's adding here. That's Rava's addition. He says, Aval Asoch Dalet Amos, no problem at all. That's fine. So then the next case is Nafal Alav Gal. If you have something that falls on top of your Eruv, Kasal Kadaitach, the Ibai, Matzi Shakyale. Maybe you would have thought, what was the din here in this case? Why would it ever be mutter? Because in theory, you could dig out your food. If there's a building that fell, but you can go dig out your food. Lema masnisin delo kerebi. Maybe you should say that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi. Why? Kerebi. If we held like Rabbi, ha'amar kol davar shemishum shvusel gazar levin hashmashos. We've seen this already 10 or 15 times. That should have been totally mutter. So we needed this case. Our Mishnah seemingly is not like Rabbi because there are cases where he does not allow this. Afilu tema kerebi, says the Gemara, no, not necessarily. Lo tzricha to boy mara v'chatzina, that the isur derabanan, in order to get to your food, requires extra utensils. It's not just a question of moving things that are muksa. It's uvdin dechol. You're taking these special materials to help you dig out, and that could even be according to Rabbi. Our Mishnah could still work even according to Rabbi. What the Gemara is bothered by, though, is why do we need all of these cases? We have case number 1 of where it fell outside of the tchum, and we have case number 2, which is that a building fell on top of it. But the point is that it's no longer a good eruv. Why do we need so many different cases? So says the Gemara, Vitzriche, we need all of them. Why do we need all of them? If I only had the case of my item, my eruv rolling outside of my 2,000 amos, Mishum delay sagabe. It's no longer near me, so I should assume that it's not shaykh to me. Aval, nafal alav gal de gabe. It's 1 foot away from me. There's just a building on top of it. It's not in a different rishus. It's with me. I can't physically get to it right now. But it's huve eruva b'makom echad. Havamina, that would have been fine. I might have thought that would have worked. So we needed both of those cases, and the reverse is also true. Itana nafal alav gal. Had I left out the case of Disgalgel chutz latchum, and I only had the case of nafal alav gal, where the building fell on top of it or something fell on top of it, mishum de michse. I would have argued that over there it's covered, you can't see it. I'm on disgalgel, I can look at it. Not only that, but says the Gemara, zimnin da'asi ziko ma'isila Maisile. Sometimes there's a wind that can blow the food back into your 2,000 amos. We needed both cases in order to make sure that we would not have made an error in assuming that one of them would be permissible when they in fact are not. Says the Gemara, what about the cases Onisraf Truma Vinitmes? Why? Lamali, why do I need that case? Says the Gemara, Tana Nisraf. Why do I need the case of Nisraf? Says the Gemara, top of Lamed Hamid Beis, Lodiach Kocho de Rabbi Yossi, to teach me how powerful of a shita Rabbi Yossi's shita is. What's he talking about? Rashi, Dibur Hamaschil, Lodiach Kocho de Rabbi Yossi, says Rashi, Da'afal Gav de'enu olam lo mitzar. That's pretty remarkable. He says that there are even case scenarios that as long as it was there by Bein Hashmashos, but it burned up and it's gone, Hareza Eruv. It's remarkable. That's a big chiddush. So says the Gemara, we needed the case of Nisraf to teach us the chiddush of Rav Yossi, that even though it's mamish nowhere in the world, it's ashes, doesn't make a difference. It would have been ashes for B'dikas Chametz too. It's nothing. It's inedible. We don't care. It's still considered to be an Eruv. What about Tana Truma Benitmes? That case, we needed Lehodiach HaKocho de Reb Meir. What did Reb Meir say? Take a look at Rashi, top line, last word on the line. Lehodiach HaKocho de Reb Meir, De'afal Gav de Yeshno Ba'olam, V'yesh Lomar He'amidna B'vein HaShmashos Al Chezkasa, V'kodem L'chein Tahora Haisa, V'luhachi Lo Amrinan Chazaka L'kula. So there, we don't have the Chezkas Kashrus. That's interesting. You have competing Chazakos. We know that something is broken here. We know that the Truma became Tameh. We also have a Chezkas Kashrus on it. So which one happened? Like, how do you interplay those two things? So says the Gemara, the Chumrah case is to make sure that we know that Truma Benitmes, that it's not going to work. The Sava Reb Meir, Sveika L'Chumrah. Remember in our case, we said that Reb Meir was Chamar Gamal. He says that he was that case where he was Machmir in our case of Safek Eruv. Says the Gemara, are you sure? V'hatnan. This is a long Mishnah. V'hatnan, what is the Mishnah that makes it seem like Reb Meir held not like what we thought? Our Mishnah seems to say that he was Machmir, Safek L'Chumrah. Are you sure? V'hatnan. Tameh sheyarad litpol. A person who's tameh goes into the mikvah. Safek taval, safek lo taval. He's not sure if he dunked. What does that mean? Maybe, or a woman, whoever. Let's talk about Hilchos Nida. That a woman goes into the mikvah, she comes out of the mikvah, she's like, I'm not sure if the top of my head was submerged. So that's safek taval, safek lo taval. I don't know. In another case, vafilu taval. No, she was totally under the water. Safek taval be'arba'im sa, safek lo taval be'arba'im sa. Second type of safek is not one of quality of dunking, but it's just volume and kashrus of mikvah. V'chein, and similarly, shnei mikvahs. You went into one mikvah, be'achas yesh mehen arba'im so, ve'achas ein ba arba'im so. There was more vados here. We know one is 42. We know one is 38. We just don't know which one you went in. The taval be'achas mehen ve'eno yodea be'eza mehen taval. So there, what do we say? In all of those cases, sfeiko tamei. In all of those cases, when we have a suffix, we say that the person's tamei. When do we say such a thing? And here's where things get a little complicated for Reb Meir. Betuma chamura. Aval betuma kala, it's only true by tuma chamura. Let's say, just as an example, hilchos nida. Then we would say sveko tameh, like that whole laundry list of cases. The case of safek taval, the case of I was taval but not sure if it's 40, and the case of I went into one of two mikvahs and not sure which one I went into. I know one is 40 plus and one is 40 is minus 40. So it says the Gemara, that's only true by tuma chamura. Aval. Betuma kala, however, in regards to things that are lightweight tumas, let's see what that is defined as. We learned this in Hilchos Shabbos. Remember the famous aliyah of Chananya? So a lot of the dinim that we learned back in Shabbos many blot ago. Kigon sha'achal ochlin tmein, you ate food that was tamei, v'shasa mashkin tmein, v'haba rosh v'ruba b'mayim, she'uven, you had most of your body in still water, o shenaflo al rosho, v'al rubo shlosha lugin mayim, you had water that was poured on you, she'uven, v'yorad litval, and then you went into the mikvah. In all of those cases, safek taval, safek lo taval. In that case, if you're not sure if you dunked, again, your head didn't go under. Or, ve'afilu taval, savek taval b'arba'im sa, savek lo taval b'arba'im sa. I'm not sure how much water is in the mikvah. Or, v'chein, shnei mikvos. There are two mikvos in front of me. One's 42, one's 38. So I'm not sure which one I went into. So be'achas yesh b'arba'im sa, be'achas ein b'arba'im sa. They're different size, one above, one below the 40 mark. The taval be'achas mehen be'enu yodea be'ezmen taval, sveko tahor. So what do we see there? We see that in cases that are not chamura, in cases that are only kal, we say sveko tahor. Now, is our case of eruv a case of chamura or a case of kal? L'chora, we would have all argued that it's kal. And who's talking here? Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, as Rashi highlights right here. So by saying sveko tahor, and you're the Tanakama, and Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, So the suffix with a tuma kala seems to be not l'chumra. So you should be mekel in our Mishnah. Why are you machmir? But let's just finish with the last word. Yosi Matame, he was of the opinion that you're Matame in those cases. But Reb Meir, if Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, why were you lenient by tuma kala? I don't understand. If what you're saying is true, that in our case you were makbid on a suffix, you should have been makbid here too. Answers the Gemara, Kasavar of Meir, huge machlokes tanoim, rishonim, Kasavar of Meir, halfway down Lamed Hey Amid Beis, Tchumen deoraisa ninhu. Do we say that the Isra of Tchumen deoraisa, do we say that Tchumen is deoraisa or not? So according to Reb Meir, you're right. The reason why in this Mishnah by Tumakala I was lenient by a suffix is because it's a din derabanan. But when it comes to our case of Tchumen, because Reb Meir was of the opinion that Tchumen are deoraisa, so now we have a principle called suffix deoraisa l'chumra. You forgot to bench, you bench again. Well, we don't know. If you don't know if you benched, you bench again. Right? If you don't know, if you said Birchos HaTorah, we paskin the Birchos HaTorah Deraisa, you say them again, not the whole thing. You just say Sher B'charbanu and learn some Torah afterwards. We have a lot of cases like this and everything. Sukkah, Lulav and Esther, or whatever. 1,000, every Deraisa, everything. You put on your tefillin, you're like, I feel like it was a little low. Put them on again without a bracha, but put them on again. Suffix Deraisa l'chumra. Just a little bit of a brain spinner. There's a machlokes. If suffix Deraisa l'chumra is a din Deraisa or a din Derabanan. Because that's just confusing. But it's true. There is a machlokes. That means on a Torah level, am I obligated to bench again if I am besuffic, or is that just the rabbis who are obligating me to do that? We know the din. The din is you bench again if you're besuffic. You bench lulav and esrog again if you're besuffic. We know. Fine. But is that a din deoraisa or a din derabanan? That's a machlokes rishonim, I think, somewhere in Kedushin. And that, we're not going to get into that now, but that's basically coming up here. That's what the Gemara says, Kasavar of Meir, Tchumen deoraisa ninhu. Therefore, our distinction is fine, that in our Mishnah, it's Chamar Gamal. The reason why in our Mishnah, Rav Meir was of the opinion that in the case of Safek, that we're Machmir, is because he holds Tchumen ar deoraisa. Mashein came in the Stam Mishnah, which we just saw above by Tumakala, of course he's going to say that it's Tahora, because that's the Safek derabanan. And Safek derabanan lekula. Says the Gemara, the Savar of Meir Tchumen Doraisa. Are you sure that Reb Meir holds that Tchumen are Doraisa? Why? What's the problem? Says the Gemara, V'hatnan, im ein yachol lehavlio. So then, Bizu Amar Rav Dustoi, Rabbi Dustoi Bar Yana, Mishum Rabbi Meir, Shamati, Shemekadrin Baharim. Okay, here's a, basically, how do we measure the 2,000 amos? Let's say the ground is a little wavy. Do we measure every peak and valley? No, we don't. We draw a perfectly straight line as if the ground is flat, ignoring all of the little dips and all, we just ignore it. When there's a dip, there's more real estate. We don't care. 2,000 amos lakula is 2,000 amos as the crow flies. And we don't care if there's some dips and peaks. We don't care. So says the Mishnah, that's called lahavlio. Lahavlio is to swallow up the extras, the peaks and the valleys. We don't care about that. We draw as the crow flies, 2,000 amos, and then we're done. However, what if you're not able to? So then, if you're not able to because you have a huge mountain, so what do? See, why couldn't you? Because what they used to do is they used to have these, Rashi says this, they had these 50 amma strings that they would use as their measuring tool. A mountain's not shaykh, so what would they do? They would basically drill a hole through the tunnel, conceptually. They drill a hole through the tunnel so that they could measure as the crow flies without using the 50 amma string. So says the Gemara, Reb Meir, if you're of the opinion that Tchumen are Doraisa, we don't do Kedira, we don't do this theoretical cutting through a mountain to measure if it's a din Doraisa. But how do I know that? Because Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, Ein Mekadrin, Lo Ba'are Miklat, Lo Ba'egla Arufa. Both by Are Miklat and Egla Arufa, we need to measure. What's the closest city by Are Miklat? What's the closest city by Egla Arufa? How do you measure? We measure with Lahavliya, we measure with Blios, we measure with that, as the crow flies. What if there's a huge mountain? We don't say that we cut a hole in the mountain in such a case. So if that's true, why not? Torah. Because they're Dine Deoraisa. Rav Meir, if you hold that Tchumen are Deoraisa, then how can that Mishnah make sense that it says Kedera, that you're not allowed to dig? Digging doesn't apply. The theoretical cutting through a mountain doesn't apply by Dine Deoraisa. So it must be that you don't hold that it's Doraisa. Says the Gemara, Lo Kasha, Hadidei, Hadirabe. The Mari Makomos that you're quoting here that say that Kedir is allowed, it's just a machlokes in the Tanoim. So therefore, Reb Meir would be on one side of that machlokes to allow, or actually in this case, not allow for Kedir to take place because it's a din d'oraisa. In fact, says the Gemara de Kanami, and we'll wrap up with these 3 lines, this must be accurate. De Katani, because we have a brisa that says as follows, the brisa that we just saw, and we're going to make a gentle diuk in here that we might have just otherwise glossed over. Bizu Amar Rabbi Dustai bar Yanai Mishum Rabbi Meir Shamati Shemakadrin Baharim Shmamina. I heard, I don't paskin this way, but I heard that there are those who, it's amazing, just the word of Shamati is enough to create this distinction in the Tanaim, and we said that there's a machloka, it's a very strong, it's a very subtle deal with very massive implications. Just the word Shamati, I heard, does that mean it's not your Shita? Is that true throughout Shas? Not. I heard from my Rebbe, I heard from my Rebbe, I heard from my Rebbe. But here we see that this is picked up on as a diuk in the Mishnah, that the word Shamati is enough to say, Hadidei Hadirabe, that Rav Meir himself was not contradicting his own Shita. Hitaka does hold the Tchumen Ardoraisa, and he does not allow for Kedira, for this theoretical carving through a mountain to take place to measure, because that's only allowed by Dinei Derabbanan. We'll pick up in Mir Tashem tomorrow night with Daf Lamed. Have a good night.